It was the kind of night you read about in ghost stories. Stormy, dark, with rain pelting against the windows like tiny, relentless fists. My parents had left for a family emergency, assuring me they'd be back in a few hours. At 12 years old, this was my first time being home alone, and I'd been excited. The thrill of independence, the promise of staying up late, maybe even watching a horror movie or two. What I didn't know was how quickly that excitement would turn into pure, unrelenting terror. It started small, the kind of things you can easily brush off. The wooden floors creaked more than usual, and faint whispers seemed to echo through the shadows of the dimly lit living room. At first, I told myself it was my imagination, the result of a scary movie in an overactive mind. But then, the power went out. The storm outside roared, lightning streaking across the sky and briefly illuminating the living room in stark, unnatural flashes. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and curled up on the couch. My phone screen glowed in the darkness as I texted my mom, but the message failed to deliver. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. That's when I heard it. A knock at the front door. Not a soft tap, but a deliberate, echoing knock. My heart raced. I told myself it was probably just the wind. After all, the storm was fierce, and the house was old. It had to be nothing. But as I tried to ignore it, the knock came again, louder, sharper. Gripping the flashlight tightly, I forced myself to approach the door. I peeked through the peephole, but there was no one there. I stepped back, my pulse pounding in my ears. Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard another knock. This time, it came from the back door. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I made my way to the kitchen. The back door loomed in the shadows, and behind it, I saw faint, shifting shapes. Shadows, moving as if alive. I glanced out the window to the backyard, but it was empty. Nothing but the swaying trees and pouring rain. Then it happened. I felt it. Cold air brushed against the back of my neck like icy breath. I spun around, the beam of the flashlight darting wildly across the room. And that's when I saw it. A dark figure darting into the hallway. My scream pierced the silence as I bolted back to the living room, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. I was trapped. Too scared to leave the house, too terrified to stay. The whispers started again. Jason. Jason. They came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Louder now. Clearer. My name, repeated over and over like a sinister chant. My flashlight's beam swept across the room, desperate to find the source. And that's when I saw it again. Standing by the staircase was a shadowy figure. It wasn't just a shadow. Its eyes glowed a pale, unnatural white, and its head tilted at an impossible angle as it whispered, "You shouldn't have been left alone." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The figure began to glide toward me, its form twisting and writhing. Panic surged through me, and I screamed. My legs moved before my brain could process, and I ran. Up the stairs, into my bedroom. I slammed the door shut and locked it, diving under the blanket as though it could shield me from whatever was out there. The whispers grew louder, closer. The air in the room turned frigid, my breath visible in the flashlight's beam. And then, the sound that will haunt me forever. The door to my room creaking open. I knew I had locked it. Slowly, I pulled the blanket down just enough to see. My heart stopped. Standing at the foot of my bed was the shadowy figure. Its voice was 1,000 overlapping whispers as it hissed, "Why are you here alone?" The room seemed to spin, the walls closing in. The figure didn't move, but its presence felt suffocating, overwhelming. The cold seeped into my bones and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Right at this moment, luckily, my parents' car lights approached our house. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The whispers stopped. The room was silent, but the terror remained, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. When my parents reached Y room, they found me curled up in the closet, pale and trembling, clutching the flashlight like my life depended on it. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I make them understand what I had seen, what I had felt? They dismissed it as a bad dream, the product of an overactive imagination. But I know what happened that night. The memory of that unnatural, shadowy figure haunts me every time the power goes out, every time I'm left in the dark. And the worst part? I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there. Watching, waiting, for the next time I'm left alone. This story isn't just a memory. It's a scar that reminds me how fragile our sense of safety truly is. I've tried to forget that night, but it clings to me like a shadow. And though I've grown older, I've never truly been alone again. Because I know it's still out there, waiting for the right moment to return. My parents were out of town, leaving me to enjoy a rare night of complete solitude. The house was quiet, eerily quiet, but I didn't mind. I loved having the place to myself. With the lights dimmed, I lounged on the couch, flipping through TV channels, settling on a late-night sitcom. Around midnight, while I was chuckling at a joke on the screen, the volume cut out, just like that. It didn't fade, didn't stutter, it simply muted itself. I frowned, confused. Maybe I hit the mute button by accident? I reached for the remote sitting on the coffee table and pressed the volume button, but nothing happened. The numbers on the TV screen didn't even move. I shook the remote and pressed again, harder this time. Still nothing. That's when the TV turned off. Just like that, the screen went black. I froze. My eyes darted to the corners of the room, searching for any signs of movement. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it had to be a glitch. Electronics malfunction all the time, right? Then, the TV turned back on. But it wasn't the sitcom anymore. It was static. Thick, gray static that filled the screen, hissing softly like a whispering snake. I stared at it, my stomach sinking. My hands tightened around the remote as I tried to change the channel. Nothing. The buttons refused to work. And then, I noticed it. Amid the swirling static, there was something else. Shapes, faint and distorted, began to emerge on the screen. At first, it looked like random shadows, but as I squinted, they grew clearer. Faces. Pale faces with hollow eyes staring directly at me. They weren't just shapes. They were watching me. I could feel it. I dropped the remote. It hit the floor with a dull thud. I wanted to turn away, to look anywhere else, but I couldn't. My body was frozen. My breath caught in my throat as one of the faces moved closer. It was a woman, her face gaunt and stretched, her lips curling into a sinister smile. She mouthed something, but no sound came through the speakers. Just static. And then, the whispering started. It wasn't coming from the TV. It was coming from the room. From everywhere. Low guttural voices speaking in a language I didn't understand. The air felt heavy, suffocating. My chest tightened as the whispers grew louder and louder, overlapping each other until they were a deafening roar. I finally broke free from my paralysis, scrambling off the couch and fumbling for the TV's power button. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely aim. But I managed to press it. The screen went black again, and the whispers stopped. For a moment, the silence was worse. The house felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. I backed away from the TV, my eyes scanning the room, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, but I was alone. At least I thought I was. Then the TV turned itself back on. The woman was still there, her face now filling the entire screen. Her eyes seemed alive, darting around as if searching for something. And then, she looked directly at me. She raised her hand, her bony finger pointing through the screen, at me. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. My pulse was racing, my mind screaming at me to run, to get out of there. But my legs felt like lead. Her mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and the static. It started pouring out of the TV. Not just the sound, the static itself, spilling into the room like smoke, thick and cold. It crept toward me, curling around my feet. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then I felt it, a hand on my shoulder. Cold, bony fingers gripping me tightly. I whipped around, but there was no one there. The whispers returned, louder now, surrounding me, closing in. I turned back to the TV, but the woman was gone. In her place was a single word, written in blood-red letters: leave. That was all the motivation I needed. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart was hammering in my chest as I grabbed my phone to call my parents. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hit the buttons. When my mom picked up, I could barely get the words out, choking on my fear as I begged her to come home. The rest of the night was a blur. I stayed outside on the porch, too terrified to go back inside until my parents came home. When I told them what had happened, they didn't believe me. They chalked it up to exhaustion, maybe a nightmare. But then, my dad went to check the TV. He called out from the living room, his voice shaking. I ran to see what was wrong, and there he stood, staring at the TV. It wasn't even plugged in. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. I don't watch TV alone anymore. I can't. Every time I see a screen flicker, I feel like she's still there, watching and waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear the static again, faint and distant, like a whisper in the dark. And I wonder, Did I really escape that night, or did she just let me go? Friday night was hauntingly still. The kind of night where silence itself feels heavy, pressing against the walls, creeping into every corner. My parents were out of town, and for the first time in years, I had the house to myself. A century-old house perched at the edge of Oak Ridge Forest. The kind of place locals whispered about, though I never paid much attention. The night dragged on uneventfully. By 11 p.m., I was curled up on the couch, aimlessly scrolling through my phone. The sound of the wind brushing against the windows occasionally startled me, but I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks. And then it happened. My phone buzzed. A single message lit up the screen. "I am watching you." For a moment, I stared at the text, my mind scrambling for an explanation. It was from an unlisted number. My first thought was that it was a prank, some friend messing with me. But the unease that gnawed at my gut said otherwise. "Very funny," I texted back, trying to sound braver than I felt. The message went unread. A strange chill settled over the room. The air felt thicker somehow, harder to breathe. Shrugging off the rising tension, I locked my phone and reached for the remote to distract myself. But then it buzzed again. This time, a photo. My heart stopped. It was me. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. My heart hammered against my ribs as my gaze shot to the window. The curtains were drawn, but I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing against me. "Who are you? What do you want?" I typed, my fingers trembling. Again, no response. Seconds stretched into minutes. The silence felt deafening. And then, there it was. A faint creak, the unmistakable sound of a floorboard shifting upstairs. I froze, my mind racing. I was alone, or at least I was supposed to be. Slowly I stood, clutching my phone as if it could shield me from whatever was lurking in the shadows. I tiptoed to the staircase, my every step deliberate, careful. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. No answer. A part of me wanted to run, to bolt out the door and not look back. But this was my home, my sanctuary. I had to be imagining things. Summoning every ounce of courage, I climbed the stairs, each creak underfoot making my skin crawl. The upstairs hallway stretched ahead, dark and foreboding. The door to my bedroom was slightly ajar, though I was certain I'd left it shut. My breath caught as I approached, my hand shaking as I pushed it open. The room was empty, no sign of anything out of place, but then I saw it. Another photo on my bed. This one showed me at the bottom of the stairs, taken just moments ago. I stumbled back, the walls seeming to close in around me. My phone buzzed again. "You don't have much time." I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The house felt alive, its ancient bones groaning, the wind howling louder than before. And then I heard it, a low, guttural laugh. Not from outside, from inside. I spun around, every shadow suddenly threatening. There it was again, the creak of a floorboard. But this time it was coming from the attic. I didn't want to go up there. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something pulled me forward, a morbid curiosity or sheer terror driving me. The attic door loomed overhead. As I reached for the string to pull it down, my phone buzzed again. "Don't!" But it was too late. The door creaked open, the ladder unfolding with an agonizing slowness. A foul smell wafted down, thick and choking. I hesitated, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Hello?" My voice was barely a whisper. The attic was pitch black, the only light coming from my phone's flashlight. The beam trembled as I climbed, illuminating old boxes and forgotten relics. And then, in the corner, I saw it. A figure hunched over its back to me. "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice betrayed my fear. The figure didn't move. I took a step closer, the floor creaking beneath me. I said, "Who are you?" It moved, slowly. It turned, revealing a face that wasn't human. Hollow eyes, a gaping mouth stretched unnaturally wide. A scream tore from my throat as it lunged, its speed inhuman. I stumbled back, tumbling down the attic ladder, landing hard on the floor below. Pain shot through me, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet, running down the stairs, my phone slipping from my grasp. The front door was just ahead. My fingers fumbled with the lock as the creature's guttural growl grew louder, closer. Finally, the door flew open, and I bolted into the night. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's house, pounding on their door until it opened. Breathless, I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. They let me in, locking the door behind me as I collapsed on their couch. The police were called, and when they searched the house, they found nothing. No figure, no photos, not even my phone. It was as if none of it had ever happened, but I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that low, guttural laugh. It's never far away. This experience changed me forever. I can never step foot in that house again. It's been sold, but whoever lives there now, I can only hope they heed the warning I didn't. If you ever get a message telling you to leave, don't question it. Just run.